I never thought I'd end up working nights at a 7-Eleven, but life doesn't care about what you thought you'd do. After Dad left, Mom tried to keep us afloat, but between my little brother Jesse's insulin and the back rent stacking up, we were barely treading water. I was 17 when I traded homework for graveyard shifts, midnight to 6 nights a week, standing under buzzing fluorescent lights while drunks and truckers bought lottery tickets they couldn't afford. Our store was the last stop before the highway, tucked between a boarded-up nail salon and a payday loan place that still had Christmas decorations up in April. You could smell the burnt coffee before you even pulled the door open. Most nights, it was just me and Big Mike, the stalker with a bad back and worse attitude. We were invisible to the world, ghosts manning the coffee machines and sweeping stale Doritos off the floor. No raises, no security, no real backup when the bell chimed after midnight. But there were some bright spots, like Sophia and her mom, Elena. Every Friday night like clockwork, they'd come in for a blue raspberry Slurpee and a snack. Sophia was a tiny, bright-eyed thing, always grinning like she knew some joke you hadn't heard yet. Elena worked 2 jobs but still made time for that little tradition. That night, everything felt off. Elena looked drained, pale, jumpy. She clutched Sophia's hand so tight it made me wince. "Can you watch her for an hour? I just need to handle something," she asked, voice cracking. Before I could answer, she pressed a crumpled $20 into my palm and disappeared out the door without waiting for a reply. I stared after her, my stomach knotting. I should have said no. I should have called someone. Instead, I grabbed Sophia a fresh Slurpee and told myself it would all be fine. It was 11:45 p.m. By 2:47 a.m., blood would stain the tile. At first, Sophia and I made a game out of it. She taught me how to mix cherry and blue raspberry to make what she called Galaxy Slush. We stacked the hot Cheeto bags into little castles on the counter and dared each other to chug from the gross coffee pot. It was almost easy to pretend everything was normal. Almost. But as the clock dragged past midnight, the cracks started to show. Elena's phone went straight to voicemail. The camera screens behind the counter glitched, flickering like an old VHS tape. Sophia's giggles got quieter, her eyes darting toward the door every time the bell chimed. 1:15 a.m., the store was dead. No customers, no cars outside. Just the low hum of freezers and the click of the clock. Sophia curled up on one of the low benches near the window, clutching her half-melted Slurpee like a teddy bear. I sat behind the counter pretending to study the scratch-off tickets, heart sinking. Where the hell was Elena? Around 1:30, Big Mike lumbered out from the stockroom, yawning. He caught my eye, frowned, and nodded toward the cameras. They were still glitching, except for camera 6 pointing at the dumpster. It was completely blacked out. "You see that?" he muttered. I nodded. Neither of us said the obvious. Camera 6 was brand new. Corporate just installed it 2 weeks ago after a series of incidents nearby. It shouldn't be glitching. I walked the aisles, pretending to restock, pretending not to be scared. Outside, the streetlights buzzed and flickered. Then at exactly 2:47 a.m., the door chimed, and the real horror started. The guy who walked in wasn't right. Tall, wiry, wearing a 7-Eleven manager's shirt, but not one of ours. No name, tag, no familiar face. Just dead eyes and a box cutter gripped too tight in his hand. "Where's the safe?" he rasped, voice raw like he hadn't spoken in days. The blade in his hand glinted under the flickering fluorescence. Sophia dropped her Slurpee. The plastic cup hit the tile and burst, a cold splash of neon blue puddling at her feet. The sound made the man twitch toward her like a shark smelling blood. I jumped over the counter without thinking, putting myself between him and her. My hands went up automatically. "Hey man, there's no safe. Just the till. You can take it. It's not worth anything." My voice cracked like I was back in middle school. The man didn't listen. He took a step forward, the box cutter flashing. I backed up, heart hammering so loud it drowned out everything else. Then, a blur of motion. Big Mike burst out of the stockroom like a freight train, swinging a metal mop handle like a baseball bat. The first hit caught the guy across the forearm. The second smashed the box cutter out of his hand. He crumpled to the floor, howling. Sophia screamed. I grabbed her and ran behind the counter, hands shaking so hard I could barely dial 911. Mike stood over the guy, breathing hard, the mop handle poised for a third strike. The bell over the door swung wildly on its hinges. The smell of burnt coffee and fear filled the air. The cops came fast, sirens splitting the night apart. They cuffed the guy on the ground without asking questions. Turns out he wasn't a manager, not even close. He was a drifter fresh out of prison, casing 7-Elevens along the highway for months. His rap sheet was longer than the coffee counter. Armed robbery, assault, even a kidnapping charge that got pled down years back. Sophia sat curled in a ball, under the counter, clutching my jacket like a lifeline. She didn't even flinch when the cops tried to talk to her. They found Elena a few hours later, dumped near the highway. Bruised, battered, but alive. She'd been dragged into a car outside our store around midnight. That's why the cameras glitched. Somebody had cut the feed. Somebody who knew where to strike. Corporate showed up around dawn, suits with fake smiles and clipboards. They didn't ask about Big Mike saving our lives. They just asked about the incident report and whether the store would be cleaned up before morning rush. Big Mike? They fired him 2 days later. Violation of company safety protocols, they said. No severance, no thank you, nothing. Sophia's Slurpee cup, the one she dropped, ended up being key evidence. The guy's fingerprints matched 3 other robberies, where the cameras had conveniently glitched too. The bloodstain near the register wouldn't come out no matter how much bleach we used. Corporate just dragged a rack of pre-wrapped sandwiches over it and called it good enough. Welcome to 7-Eleven. I don't work there anymore. After that night, I found a gig at a gas station across town, one with bulletproof glass between me and the customers and a manager who carries. But some things stick. I still jump whenever the doorbell chimes after dark. Still catch myself checking every customer's hands before I even look at their face. Still dream about the mop handle swinging through the air like a sword. Big Mike moved on too. I heard he's doing warehouse work now, night shifts, where the only thing he has to worry about are rats and broken pallets. Sophia? She still comes by sometimes. She won't touch anything blue anymore. Won't even look at the Slurpee machine. The 7-Eleven got new management, new cameras, new floor tiles. But if you stand behind the counter, way in the back where the cold seeps out of the freezers, you can still see it. A faint stain under the sandwich rack. Blue raspberry and blood. Frozen into the tile. Waiting. And sometimes, just sometimes, at exactly 2:47 a.m. the doorbell chimes and no one is there. You don't plan to end up working nights at a 7-Eleven, it just happens. When Dad's factory locked its doors and left half our town to rot, he didn't bounce back. He sank into his lazy boy with a bottle of cheap whiskey and a pharmacy's worth of antidepressants. Meanwhile, my sister racked up DUI fines we couldn't pay. I was 19, broke, and desperate when I walked into the 7-Eleven on Route 9 and begged for a job. For 3 years, I clocked in 6 nights a week, graveyard shifts that blurred together in a haze of burnt coffee, moldy mop water, and the endless, fluorescent buzz overhead. Customers treated me like part of the decor. Cops didn't even nod at me. I scraped by on stale donuts and whatever expired sandwiches I could sneak home without getting written up. Then the new district manager showed up. A guy in shiny loafers who smelled like cinnamon gum and pure hatred. Suddenly, every clock in was monitored. Every bathroom break excessive. When Mom ended up in the ER after a fall, I missed one shift. One. I called. I left messages. I even texted the assistant manager. Didn't matter. They fired me on the spot, walked me out like I was a criminal, right past the hot dog rollers still crusted in grease from my last shift, right past the Slurpee machine I'd cleaned 1,000 times, right past the security cameras that somehow never caught customers throwing beer bottles at my head. And something inside me broke. Not the part that cared about the job. That part died months ago. No, it was the part that thought maybe, just maybe, you got points for loyalty. I didn't plan what happened next, but once I started, I couldn't stop. I knew that store better than I knew my own bedroom. I knew the back door latch stuck, unless you jimmied it with your hip. I knew where they hid the spare keys for deliveries. I knew the one camera that was always malfunctioning. At 2:17 a.m. after my last official shift, I slipped around the building, heart pounding like a drum. The delivery door gave way with a grunt and a scrape. I slipped inside. The store was dead quiet except for the soft gurgle of the Slurpee machine. The place where I'd sweated for pennies. The place that tossed me out like a moldy taquito. First, I hit the Slurpee machine. I unscrewed the back panel, pulled out the filters, and packed the vents full of expired beef jerky I'd found buried in the stockroom months ago. Next, I moved to the coffee station, pried open the plumbing under the brew station and poured in a gallon of curdled milk from the expired dairy bin. Thick, sour, evil-smelling sludge. Then I grabbed a tray of ancient grayish hot dogs from the fridge. I stuffed them deep behind the frozen drink machines where no one ever cleaned. Tucked a few inside the air vents for good measure. And the final touch, the masterpiece. In the mop sink out back, I blended spoiled nacho cheese, expired milk, rotting chili, and a good slug of floor cleaner into a sickly, bubbling Slurpee. Left it fermenting like a cursed brew, thick and foul. I didn't wreck the place. That's not how you hurt 7-Eleven. You don't smash windows or spray graffiti. That's obvious. That's fixable. No, you make the smell seep into the walls, into the pipes, into the soul of the building. I locked the door behind me, walked out into the cool night, and waited for the storm to hit. At first, I thought I got away clean. I picked up a new gig at the Circle K across town, crappier pay, even crappier customers. But I told myself it was a fresh start. I scrubbed my 7-Eleven name tag off my jacket with steel wool and bleach. I stopped looking over my shoulder when I clocked in, but about 2 weeks later, things started happening. My time card started disappearing. Not lost, gone. I'd clock in, finish a shift, and the system would claim I never showed up. I lost 2 days' pay before the manager shrugged and told me to keep better track. Then the smell started. Every time I opened my locker, it hit me. A wave of spoiled milk stink, thick and nauseating. I scrubbed the inside with disinfectant. I threw away my sneakers. It didn't matter. By morning, the smell would be back. Stronger. Then the cameras at Circle K started acting up. Same flicker I remembered from 7-Eleven's back room. Same random static bursts when I was alone in the store at night. It was like the rot I'd planted back on Route 9 was reaching out, stretching invisible fingers across town to find me. One night I stayed after my shift to help clean up a spill. As I mopped, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the freezer door. Behind me, just for a second, was my old 7-Eleven name tag, floating in the mop sink. I spun around. Nothing. Just the mop bucket, sloshing grimy water across the tiles. But the smell hit me so hard I gagged. Sour milk, burnt hot dogs. Something else. Something deeper. Like the earth itself was rotting under my feet. I thought about quitting. But where would I go? What other job would have me? And then the phone rang at 3:17 a.m. caller ID. 7-Eleven area manager. Against every instinct, I answered. "We found your little gift." The voice was calm, almost amused. "You should come see." I should have hung up. Should have thrown the phone across the parking lot. Instead, I got in my beater Civic and drove toward Route 9, heart rattling against my ribs. When I got there, the store wasn't open, wasn't even closed. It was condemned. Boards slapped across the doors, hazard tape flapping in the breeze. City notice stapled crooked to the wall. Unfit for occupancy. Through the cracks I could see inside. The ceiling dripped black sludge that oozed down the walls. The rotting hot dogs had fused into the drywall, stretching into foul knotted masses like cancerous roots. The floor tiles were warped, buckling as if something underneath them was swelling, pushing up from the foundation itself. And in the back, in the mop sink where I'd left my brew, I saw it, my old name tag, still floating, still gleaming faintly under the ruined fluorescent lights. The smell hit me even through the boards, thick, sweet, sour, chemical. It clung to my hair, my skin, my clothes. I stumbled back to my car, dry heaving. The area manager's words echoed in my head. The stockroom breathes now. I didn't understand what he meant. Not fully. Not yet. I tried everything. I burned my Circle K uniform, bought new shoes, changed deodorant, showered twice a day, scrubbed till my skin peeled. Nothing worked. Everywhere I went, the sickly sweet stench followed. Customers at Circle K wrinkled their noses. Co-workers started requesting not to work my shifts. My sister said it was in my head. Mom didn't say anything, just wrinkled her nose and turned up the air freshener. But late at night, when the store was dead and the freezers hummed like a funeral dirge, I could hear it. A wet, bubbling sound, like something breathing through. Milk and cheese and meat. The city tore down the old 7-Eleven last month, bulldozed it flat, hauled off the wreckage and covered trucks. But when they ripped up the concrete slab underneath, the construction crews gagged. The ground was black, soaked deep with spoiled dairy and rotting meat. They said the smell was so bad they had to wear respirators. Said no amount of bleach touched it. Said the stink had seeped into the soil. I still drive by sometimes just to see, just to remember. And every time, without fail, the second I pass that empty lot, my car fills with the smell of spoiled milk. Sometimes I think about that mop sink. The bubbling Slurpee of doom. My old name tag's still floating. Maybe it's still out there. Maybe it's growing. Maybe I didn't just wreck a store. Maybe I created something. Something that doesn't forget. Some people talk about rock bottom like it's a single moment. A crash, a flame out. For me, it was a slow grind. A flat tire I couldn't afford to fix. A missed rent check. A phone call from the electric company that I let go to voicemail because I already knew what they were going to say. That Friday night, September 15th, 2023, I was just trying to make it to girls' night without crying in my car. I was wearing jeans that didn't fit right anymore, and a hoodie that smelled faintly of mildew because the dryer at my apartment complex had been broken for weeks. The rain was coming down in sheets by the time I pulled into the 7-Eleven on Maple Street. Brookside wasn't exactly the kind of neighborhood you went strolling through after dark, but when it was your only option, you got used to clutching your keys between your fingers and walking fast. My car's check engine light had been blinking for days. Rent was overdue again. My best friend Emily had been dodging my texts all week, and deep down I knew why. Nobody wanted to deal with someone who always had a new disaster. Still, all I was thinking about when I shoved through the 7-Eleven doors was getting chips and soda and pretending, for one night, that everything was fine. I barely noticed the woman at first, just a blur of motion. A figure in a dripping hoodie crashing into my shoulder on her way out the door. Her eyes, wide and wild, met mine for half a second before she disappeared into the rain. I hesitated. Was something wrong? But exhaustion wrapped itself around me like a heavy blanket. Probably just some junkie, I told myself. Brookside was full of them. I grabbed a plastic basket and forced my feet toward the snack aisle, pretending not to notice how the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering like they were about to die. I should have left then. I should have listened to that crawling feeling at the back of my neck. But I didn't. And that's when everything went sideways. The 7-Eleven smelled like it always did. A weird mix of burnt coffee, mop water, and something sweeter, like melted plastic. The kind of smell that sticks in your clothes no matter how long you shower. I made it halfway to the chips when I felt it. Something cold, wet, sliding down my shoulder. At first I thought it was just the AC dripping again. The ceiling had those big yellow water stains, and everyone in town knew maintenance didn't come around anymore unless the roof caved in. But when I brushed at my hoodie, my fingers came away sticky, and it stank. I froze, bile rising in my throat. Slowly I looked up. There, perched on top of the snack shelves like some nightmare animal, was a man. His clothes hung off him like wet rags, his skin stretched tight over sharp bones. His eyes were wild and sunken. In his hand he clutched a rusted syringe, and the ooze from it was what had dripped onto me. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that promised nothing good. "You're next," he hissed. Before I could even move, he dropped from the shelves. The motion was so fast, so wrong that my brain lagged behind my body. I stumbled backward, crashing into a rack of cheap sunglasses. The man darted toward the back of the store, toward the freezers. I gasped, heart jackhammering, and sprinted toward the front counter where Raj, the cashier, was already on the phone, shouting into the receiver. His eyes were huge behind his thick glasses, and then, like a linebacker out of nowhere, the security guard, Tony, tackled the guy by the slushy machine. The man screamed and twisted, his rusted syringe skittering across the grimy floor tiles. Tony pinned him hard. Blood from somewhere, his or the guy's I didn't know, splattered onto the floor near the nacho station. The whole store seemed to tilt sideways. Raj kept yelling into the phone. I stood there, frozen, trying not to puke. And as the man struggled, under Tony's grip, he twisted his neck around to glare at me. "You'll see me again," he spat. His voice was like sandpaper scraping bone. I wanted to think it was over. That they'd cuff him, shove him into the back of a squad car, and my night would go back to being the normal kind of awful. But when I wiped at the sticky mess on my hoodie, my hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the napkins Raj shoved at me. Couldn't stay. Not for the cops. Not to give a statement. Not even to yell at someone about what the hell just happened. I tossed the basket of chips and soda on the counter and bolted out into the storm. The rain hit me like a wall, cold and heavy, but it didn't wash the feeling off. The sticky stink clung to me, soaked into my skin. I fumbled with my keys, fingers slipping. It felt like an eternity before I got the door unlocked and threw myself into the driver's seat. When I twisted the ignition, the car made a sick, grinding noise. Once, twice, nothing. "Come on, come on," I muttered, slamming my palm against the steering wheel. Finally, the engine wheezed to life. I peeled out of the lot like something was chasing me. I didn't realize until I was halfway home that I was crying. Silent tears sliding down my face, hot and shameful. At home, I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I kicked off my soaked sneakers, stripped off the ruined hoodie, and stumbled into the bathroom. I scrubbed my skin raw under scalding water, but the smell didn't leave. When I closed my eyes, I saw his face. Those hollow eyes. That syringe. After an hour, I finally sat on the edge of my bed, shivering in a towel. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another missed call from my landlord. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because outside, beyond the rattling window blinds, I swore I saw a shape. Still, waiting. Sleep never came that night. Every creak of the building, every groan of the pipes made me flinch. By 4 a.m. I gave up, wrapped myself in a blanket and stared at the window, convinced that if I blinked too long, I'd see him there, the junkie, the syringe. I told myself it was just fear, just nerves. I was fine, I wasn't fine. The next day, everything went sideways. First, the car refused to start at all, completely dead. I had to walk to the gas station 2 miles away just to call a tow. Then Emily canceled girls' night, said she wasn't feeling up to it. I heard the fake in her voice. The distance. I didn't blame her. Who wanted to hang out with a walking bad omen? Back at my apartment, I found a note taped to my door from the landlord. Last warning, rent due or eviction. I crumpled it in my fist, threw it across the room, and through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched every time I passed a window, every time I stepped outside. At the grocery store, I caught a glimpse of someone in a hoodie, loitering near the carts, staring. I left my groceries behind. At night, the shadows under the street lamps seemed thicker, closer. Once, I heard a tapping on my window, soft, fingernail light. When I yanked the blinds open, there was nothing there, just the wind, just the fear. I started sleeping with the lights on. Started double bolting the door even though the lock barely worked. Started carrying my keys between my fingers everywhere just in case. Because the man at the 7-Eleven hadn't just touched me with that syringe, he had left something behind. Mark, a promise. Weeks passed. The police said they couldn't find him. Claimed he'd been arrested, released, disappeared. Typical Brookside justice. The world moved on. Emily stopped texting. My car got towed. Rent stacked up. Bills stacked up higher. But the fear stayed. Now, when I walk down the street, I keep my head low. Now, when I shop for groceries, I keep one eye on every exit. Now, when I hear footsteps behind me at night, I don't pretend it's nothing. I run. The stain from that night never left my hoodie, no matter how much bleach I poured on it. Eventually, I just threw it away, but I still smell it sometimes. Sour, metallic, rotting. Sometimes I think about moving, starting over somewhere else. But Brookside has a way of holding on to you, like sticky fingers you can't shake. Sometimes I wonder if he really said, "You'll see me again," or if it was a warning, or a curse. Every night before I fall asleep, I check the windows. Check the locks, double check, triple check, because I know better now. Fear isn't something you can wash off, it soaks into you, and once it's there, it never really leaves. It was March 8, 2024, when I clocked in for yet another graveyard shift at the 7-Eleven on Holloway Road in Crestwood, a town that seemed to be stuck in some kind of sleepy purgatory. It was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to change, except the people who came and went, some disappearing without a trace, but nobody ever talked about that. I didn't have time to think about anything except surviving the next 8 hours. I had enough problems without adding the town's dark reputation to the mix. My student loans were overdue, my car was in the shop again, and my girlfriend had been slowly ghosting me for weeks. She hadn't even bothered to text back when I sent her a picture of my lunch earlier that day. Small stuff like that piled up. It was after 11 p.m. when Derek, my manager, pulled me aside during a slow moment. He asked if I knew anyone who could cover weekends for him, as he was looking to take a few days off. The only person I could think of was Nathan Cole, a guy from my apartment complex who always paid his rent on time and seemed like a decent guy. At first, Nathan was the perfect employee, polite, efficient, and never caused any trouble. He was a little weird about the rotisserie hot dogs, but that wasn't unusual. Everyone had their quirks. But after a few weeks, I started noticing something off. Nathan didn't talk much. He'd just stand there staring at the spinning hot dogs in the roller grill for hours, licking his lips like they were the only thing in the world. But then, the food started disappearing. Specifically, the crispy skins of the fried chicken in the hot case. At first, I chalked it up to him being hungry. But when Derek went missing in the middle of a shift, no text, no call, just his half-drunk coffee and an uneaten taquito on the counter, that's when my gut told me something wasn't right. Derek's disappearance hit me harder than I wanted to admit. He was one of the few people I could rely on in this job. And now there he was, just gone. No explanation. I tried calling his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. After a few hours of trying to cover his shift, I decided to check the security tapes. It wasn't something I usually did, mostly because it felt like an invasion of privacy. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. What I saw on the footage sent a cold chill straight to my bones. There was Nathan, moving through the back room like he knew exactly where the cameras were. He was sneaking around, emerging with something dark and greasy in his hands. My heart raced as I watched him disappear into the back storage area with a piece of the fried chicken in his grasp. I zoomed in on the screen, watching as Nathan's hands went from the chicken skin to his mouth, where he devoured it with a disturbing enthusiasm. I turned off the monitor quickly, feeling sick. The last thing I needed was to get involved in some weird criminal activity. But there was no ignoring what I'd just seen. Nathan wasn't just hungry, he was obsessed. I decided to confront him. I had to. But even as I walked toward the beer cooler, I knew things wouldn't end well. My footsteps echoed through the quiet store as I approached Nathan, who was standing in front of the roller grill again. The whirring of the hot dogs spinning, coupled with the low hum of the store's fluorescent lights, made the whole scene feel surreal. Nathan didn't acknowledge me when I stopped beside him, his eyes glued to the hot dogs. "Nathan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You took the chicken skins, didn't you?" For a second, he didn't react. He just kept staring, his lips slightly parted, his tongue flicking out like he was in some sort of trance. Then finally, he turned to me. His eyes gleamed under the flickering lights, a sickening gleam of something. Hunger? Madness? I couldn't tell. "The skin's the best part," he whispered, his voice oddly calm. Too calm. "It's pure." Chill ran through me. I could barely process what he was saying when my eyes caught something on his sleeve. A bloody fingernail, half ripped off, clung to the fabric of his jacket. It was like a sign, an omen that made my blood turn to ice. Before I could react, Nathan lunged at me, his hands reaching out like claws. My instincts kicked in, and I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "You're Employee of the Month." I shoved the hastily scribbled name tag at him, the bright sticker gleaming in the dim light. "You're doing great." For a split second, Nathan froze. His eyes locked onto the name tag, and his entire body seemed to stiffen. I didn't wait around to see what would happen next. In one quick motion, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. By the time the cops arrived, Nathan was still staring at the name tag, as though hypnotized. The officers cuffed him and he giggled, a high-pitched, unsettling sound. "My family taught me how to savor every piece," he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear as they hauled him away. The rest of the night passed in a blur. The cops took their time, asking me questions I couldn't answer, their voices echoing in my head like a bad dream. The store was still and empty, save for the stale smell of coffee and the distant sound of the roller grill spinning. I couldn't shake the images of what I'd seen. Nathan's unblinking stare, the bloody fingernail, his obsession with the chicken skins. Something about it all didn't make sense. The next day, I called in sick. I couldn't bring myself to go back to that store, not after what had happened, not after what I'd learned. As I sat at home, scrolling through the news, I found something that made my stomach turn. The Coles, Nathan's family, weren't just some oddball weirdos, they were infamous. For generations, there had been rumors of missing people in Crestwood, all linked to the family's old butcher shop. The pieces started to fall into place. Nathan wasn't just a freak with a strange craving for chicken skin. His family had a history of darker appetites. I couldn't believe I'd worked alongside him for weeks without ever knowing. I didn't go back to the 7-Eleven. I couldn't. As soon as I realized the full extent of Nathan's family's twisted legacy, I knew I was done. The job was draining enough as it was, but this was different. There was no way I could continue to work at a place that felt like it had been tainted by something so deeply wrong. The next day, I handed in my resignation, packed up my things, and left the store behind for good. My bank account was still a mess and my car was still broken down, but I didn't care anymore. I couldn't look at a fried chicken drumstick without feeling sick, let alone the thought of a rotisserie hot dog spinning endlessly in the back of the store. I wasn't sure where I was going next, but I knew I had to get out of Crestwood. I couldn't stay here, not with the dark history of this town hanging over my head. And even though Nathan was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left behind, something that would haunt me forever. The real horror of working at the 7-Eleven wasn't the graveyard shift. It wasn't the stale coffee or the broken freezer. It was the people who worked there. You never really knew who they were or what they were capable of until it was too late. I never planned on working at the 7-Eleven on Ashford Lane, but life doesn't care about plans. It was October 12, 2023, and the cold, drizzly air had already set in, as if the world could feel the weight of everything going wrong. My mom had lost her nursing job a few months ago after the hospital's budget cuts, and with my little sister's medical bills stacking up, there was no way around it. I needed to help. The bills didn't stop coming, and neither did the pressure. My dad had split years ago, leaving my mom to handle everything, and now it was my turn. I was 19, and college was a distant dream I couldn't afford to chase anymore. The 7-Eleven was the only place that would hire me on the spot, no questions asked. The job wasn't glamorous, and the neighborhood wasn't any better. The store was a magnet for drunks, tweakers, and the kind of people who made you lock your car doors when you drove past. But it paid. That's all I needed. At first, it wasn't so bad. The regulars were mostly harmless, though some had the kind of vibe that made you want to keep your distance. Then there was Rick, my manager, who couldn't care less about how many hours I worked as long as the shelves were stocked and the register didn't short. Budget reasons, he'd say every time I asked for more shifts. But that didn't stop him from loading me up with all the late-night shifts. What else was I going to do? I didn't have another choice. I remember the night Tank and Mandy walked in like it was yesterday. It was just after 11:30 p.m. and I was restocking the energy drinks when the bell over the door rang. The two of them strutted in like they owned the place. Mandy was always sneering like she knew something you didn't, while Tank was the kind of guy who looked like he could snap you in half without breaking a sweat. It was one of those slow, dead nights where time dragged by, and you could feel the loneliness in the air. I was shelving energy drinks when I saw them. The regulars, Tank and Mandy, wandering down the aisles like they owned the joint. Mandy cut in front of a college kid, Liam, who was just trying to grab a coffee. "Move, nerd," she said, shoving him aside without a second glance. Liam was a decent guy, a quiet type, just minding his business. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he wasn't about to let some stranger walk all over him. "There's a line," Liam said, his voice firm but controlled. But Tank didn't like being talked back to. He was like a bull in a china shop. No patience, no care for anyone around him. Without warning, he grabbed Liam by the collar and slammed his head into the Slurpee machine, sending a cascade of ice and syrup everywhere. The machine whirred, spraying neon blue liquid as Liam crumpled to the floor. I froze. For a split second, I couldn't even move. The sound of Liam's head cracking against the machine echoed in my ears, and my body just locked up. Mandy didn't even flinch. She just laughed and kicked Liam in the ribs as he groaned on the ground. I could see blood starting to trickle down his face from where he'd hit the machine. My hands shook as I grabbed the store phone. I didn't know what else to do. My finger hovered over the 911 button, but I could feel Tank's glare burning into me as he turned. "Snitch and you're next," he growled, eyes narrowed. I didn't think. I just dialed. The cops were already rolling up. Someone outside must have heard the commotion, but before they could get inside, Tank and Mandy bolted out the door. Not before Mandy hurled a big gulp at me, though, drenching me in blue raspberry. Don't know how long I stood there after they ran, staring at the mess they left behind. It felt like the store had become a war zone. Ice and syrup pooled on the floor, Liam's blood staining the tiles, and my uniform was soaked in sticky blue crap. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was louder than ever, and the flickering didn't help. Rick didn't even show up. He didn't even call. He texted me instead. "Clean it up before morning." I wanted to throw the phone across the store. "No, are you okay?" "No, sorry this happened." Just clean it up and act like nothing happened. That's how it always was at 7-Eleven. You were disposable and nobody cared as long as the store made its sales. I wiped up the blood and ice and syrup, my mind 100 miles away. What was Liam going through right now? What would happen to Tank and Mandy? Liam was hauled off in an ambulance, concussed and bleeding. I tried to clean up the mess, but it didn't feel like it mattered anymore. My hands shook as I scrubbed the sticky spots on the floor. The night dragged on, every minute feeling like an eternity. I kept thinking about Tank's words, "Snitch, and you're next." I kept checking the door, looking for him to come back, wondering if it was just a matter of time before he showed up to finish what he'd started. The night dragged on, and I finished my shift in eerie silence. The store was nearly empty now. The regulars gone, the aisles still. The buzz of the freezer section seemed louder in the quiet, and the clock on the wall felt like a countdown to something I wasn't sure I was ready for. When the morning crew arrived, I handed them the keys, not even bothering to mention how screwed up everything was. The whole night felt like a dream, except it wasn't. It was my reality now. Back at home, my mom asked why I was so jumpy, why I kept glancing over my shoulder. I lied, of course. I told her it was nothing, just another rough night at work. My sister needed new meds, and that was all I could focus on. But the truth? I couldn't shake the feeling that Tank and Mandy would be back, that I was somehow stuck in this cycle I couldn't escape from. I didn't even want to go back to 7-Eleven, but I had no choice. The worst part? Tank and Mandy got out on bail the next morning. I saw them on the news laughing, no care in the world. It's been a few weeks since that night and things haven't gotten any better. I keep a switchblade in my back pocket now, just in case. I've become hyper-aware of every sound in the store, every movement by the door. The bell rings and my heart skips a beat. The 7-Eleven was supposed to be a paycheck, a way to survive, but it's starting to feel like a trap. Every night I walk in, I wonder if I'll be the next target. Every shift is another round in the ring, and every time the door chimes, my nerves spike. I can't shake the image of Tank and Mandy, laughing as they ran out that night, uncaring, like they owned everything in their path. And here I am, stuck in this never-ending cycle. Rick doesn't care. The cops barely care. No one cares. And the worst part? I'm starting to wonder if I care anymore.